Open your umbrellas and secure your waterproof bibs, because we're about to rain down a cats and dogs amount of knowledge uponst you. And if you're listening to this podcast, chances are your fronts are already soggy enough as it is. This episode, Professor Grace is going back to her speech-language pathology roots, because those degrees have got to pay off somehow. She's looking at the functionality of echolalia and Gestalt phrases, breaking down the differences between Gestalt and analytical language processing, and providing strategies for supporting the Gestalt communicators in your life. Also, we rant about high school English required reading, continue to suffer from the Cinemagic song, and deliver a pitch-perfect imitation of the Grey Lourie. You can find all this and more only on your favorite avian-themed AuDHD podcast.
They said that we'd grow out of it. Well, the joke's on them, that's just our brains. We're eccentric, loud, and stubborn, and most of our clothing is covered in stains. It's not a deficit of attention, there's just too much to think about. So if executive dysfunction becomes a little too much, if you forgot why you came in this room, or you're hypersensitive to touch, then put on your seamless socks and come join our little flock. Bitches stimming together, we're weirds of a feather, weirds of a feather.
All right. You think it's time to get the old welcome?
Yeah.
To Weirds of a Feather?
Oh.
An AuDHD-Adjacent podcast.
Working on
I
it.
got it.
You got it.
I'm Grace Beret.
And I'm Kristen Stanhope.
And we're your hosts. I forgot to say that.
Of Weirds of a Feather. Did you already say that?
I already said that. An AuDHD-Adjacent podcast.
Oh my gosh. My short-term memory.
All right, Kristen.
Yeah.
Are you ready for a warm-up question?
I'm ready for a warm-up.
I know we're sweaty. Would you like to get a little sweatier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Always.
Always. All right. So this is kind of a two-parter.
Yeah.
Ian is the one who actually suggested this as a question for you.
Okay.
All right. Have you ever read, or would you ever read, a book series out of order on purpose? And if you were to start a book series and then realize you had started on like book 3 accidentally, for example, what would you do? Would you go back and start at book 1? Would you continue on to book 4? Or would you just give up and call it a day?
How far into book 3?
You finish book 3.
I finished book 3.
And you go to start the next one, and you're like, oh shit, that was the third one.
Do I like book 3?
Yes.
I like it a lot.
You like it, yeah. It's not your favorite book, but you like it.
I have one more question.
What you got?
Is it, you know how some series, they're like series, but also somewhat independent of each other?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like Harry Potter, where you kind of have to read the first ones to understand what's going on? Or like Lord of the Rings, you can't go through, like, you can't start the Two Towers without reading the Fellowship.
Well, I was going to say, it's got to be a book series that wouldn't require too much back knowledge if you started book 3 without realizing. Right. But also, it's you.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a book series that requires back knowledge, but you just start it anyways, and then you're like mad and confused the whole time. I'm like, who is that? Why didn't they explain that? You know, I can see either way happening.
I would probably, if I really like the book, I'd probably start at book 1 and then go through. Or I would abandon entirely.
Okay.
It depends on how mad I am.
Okay. Yeah, that was
if
really
I
my thought.
Liked it,
that you'd be angry.
I'd be like, oh yeah, no, silly me. I'll go back and read book 1. But if I was just like angry the whole time, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm
You're
done.
giving up.
Scorched earth.
Okay. Fuck this. Well, I was kind of thinking if you were to read book 3 and then realize there were one and 2, it's kind of like creating a prequel for yourself. And that's kind of fun, you know? It's like when a movie comes out and then you get a prequel.
About it.
Right?
Did Ian start a book halfway?
I think he is listening to a book series right now where you can listen to them in any order. Like they do build a bit on each other, but you can also listen to them out of order. So I think he has been listening.
What's the book series? I gotta know.
Oh, it's historical fiction.
Oh.
Ooh. I'll have to think of it. Yeah, I don't know. It's not
like a lot of
in
work.
my wheelhouse, but he is really enjoying it. So, and there's like 20 of them. So
it's not Fairy Smut?
No, it's
okay,
not.
I'm not
it's
interested.
a little different. Yeah, I don't think you would care for it. Not up your alley. No, Ian is not listening to Fairy Smut. But yeah, I think he's just kind of bopping around wherever he feels like the wind will take him next. And then we kind of thought about you and how you are the opposite of that. And you like things to be in order and sequential.
They wrote them in order for a reason. You got to read them in order. I wouldn't stop book 3 halfway through I don't know. Maybe I would.
Okay, so that's I guess that's part of the question.
If you realize, I probably would, because I wouldn't know who these characters are and their backstory. So I'd have like a little teaser.
Yeah.
And then I'd go back and do book 1.
All right.
And 2, and then continue onwards.
All right. Isn't that kind of a fun idea, though, that you could create a prequel for yourself? If it was a book that didn't require like too much back
Depends on
knowledge.
the book.
Yeah.
Depends on the book.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. All right.
Okay.
Should we get into this thing?
I'm toasty. Yeah.
You warm? I am also warm.
We're both warm.
We are warm boys. Should we do little accomplishments?
Yeah.
All right. Little accomplishments, but big in our hearts. Kristen.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you accomplish?
Today.
Yeah.
Today. Necessary, but it's still an accomplishment. I took an everything shower. It was so nice. Cranked that on hot. And then I did a deep condition. I shaved my legs. I put on the Jergens, like tanning, the gradual tanner lotion.
Yeah. Whoa. You do that in the morning before you go out and have a potentially like sweaty day? That seems like a risk.
I needed to.
Okay.
My hair was super greasy.
No, but I'm saying just the self-tanner. Like what if you put on your self-tanner?
It's like the lotion tanner. It's
not
but
like lotion. Don't you sweat and then your lotion kind of like drips?
Yeah, but it's absorbed by then.
Oh. Okay.
It's absorbed by then. I'm not like immediately going outside and running like a half marathon.
I guess I just get so sweaty once I go outside that I get anxious that all my lotion is just going to like drip off me and be like splotchy. That's a me thing though.
Yeah. I think it's absorbed by then, so it's fine. Like I wait like a solid 15 before I put like clothes on or anything.
Okay. Let
that sink in.
Yeah.
Which is always awkward because I like don't know what to do, so I just kind of stand in the bathroom.
Stand there like this.
Yeah. Very Frankenstein-esque.
Yeah.
But yeah, I washed my hair. I even did like the do you have that like I think it's a shampoo brush, but it's like a little round thing with little nubbins on it.
Yeah.
And you kind of, to get the circulation in your scalp, I put oil on my scalp because I didn't need oil on my scalp. There was enough oil on there. But I put like that like rosemary whatever oil that smells really good.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be
good for your
like
hair growth.
Soothing. Yeah. I did the whole thing. I did the whole shebang, and I left no hot water for Christopher.
Nice.
It's what happens when you wake up late. No, I think luckily he runs way hotter, so he probably had like, it was probably fine.
Yeah,
and
it's
he
probably
was
his normal temperature.
just normal. Yeah, it's like ice cold for me though.
Yeah, probably didn't notice.
But yeah,
good job. You look clean.
Thank you. I was not this morning,
and then you were.
Yeah, I even was like last night. I was like, I'm like have to wash the sheets because when you're not that gross, but like. You just feel gross.
Yes. I've been so bad about showering lately.
Yeah. And I do like
embarrassingly bad.
I work out in the morning, so I do like a little quick rinse, but my hair, because I wear a scrub cap at work, no need to wash that.
Yeah.
So it's like, workout, dry shampoo, scrub cap, sweaty in the OR, sweaty out of the OR.
Sweaty everywhere.
Sweaty doing Peloton. It was gross.
Well, congrats on that much needed shower.
I feel great.
You smell great. You smell clean.
I even put on deodorant, which lately I've been forgetting. I have a little mini like extra deodorant in my locker at work because I forget all the time.
Smart.
It's just like one of those things. I like run out of the house and I'm like, damn it, not again.
I don't relate to that.
Okay.
I never do that. I always have deodorant on.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like I'm like,
it's one of my things I'm very good at.
Yeah. There's certain things I'm good at, not deodorant.
Yeah, that's one of mine. There are other things I'm very bad at.
Have a backup.
Smart.
A plan.
You know yourself.
Grace.
Yeah.
What did you accomplish?
I helped my friend Billy move this weekend.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Well, Ian and I are a family of truck owners. Okay, we have one truck.
You have one.
That's
yeah.
Mostly
now
Ian's.
It's a thing now.
Yeah. So I feel like it's my sworn duty as a truck family.
That's what happens when you get a truck. You sign, the lease or the rental or you sign the papers, and in the bottom it just says like, be warned, you're a truck owner and you will be required to move things for people.
Yep. And that's okay. I know that's part of my duty. I was happy to help. It's nice to be able to help. So yesterday on Sunday, Billy and I drove down to New Hampshire.
On the Lord's Day?
Yep. Oh yeah, on the Lord's Day. This is how we celebrated.
Yep.
Yeah, drove down to New Hampshire, picked up a bed and a few other things for her, came back. her moving into her new apartment in South Portland.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, she's in Sopo?
Yep, moving to Sopo.
Oh, nice.
So it was a long, sweaty day.
Yeah.
But I felt really good about it. And I was like, all right, this is my duty as a truck owner.
You're a good
I have
friend.
fulfilled my duty. Yeah, I felt like a good friend.
I'm sure Ian loved it.
Ian stayed home. Billy and I went alone.
Oh, you took the truck?
Yeah, I took the truck. Oh, yeah.
Lady power.
Yeah, I drove the truck. Yeah, Billy and I drove down. Ian got us set up with a little bag of tools because we were picking up a bed from Billy's friend.
So he had the Subaru?
Yeah, my little Subaru. Little Alice.
Has to put the seat all the way back.
Yeah,
takes like 10 minutes.
Literally, yes. Yeah, he looks like so giant in that tiny little car. Yeah, so Billy and I just drove down. Ian got us set up with like all the strapping and everything and tools before we went down.
Straps?
Yep, ratcheted those. So yeah, I felt like a good friend and
You
a
are
good
a good
person
friend.
and a good truck owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, Kristen, now that we've
Yes.
accomplished some things, are you ready to get into the meat?
Yes.
It is the meat.
It is the meat.
Should we add like some music behind that?
I don't know. I don't really know what we're doing with that.
Should we do- yeah.
We should do like a legitimate song.
Yeah. I think
That's
we
like
should.
not just like creepy.
Yeah, not us just kind of slightly changing the Arby's slogan and then saying it in a weird deep voice. What if we did an actual song?
What if we didn't actually?
What if we didn't call it the meat? Because I feel like the meat is also controversial. We have vegetarian listeners, vegan listeners.
We do. Priscilla.
Yeah, we did like a meatless meat.
A meatless meat.
But what if we just like didn't use the
Meat
phrasing
adjacent?
of meat? Yeah. What if we just called it like,
I got a noodle on it.
yeah.
I don't know what we should call it, but like,
Because like the meat is really like
it's
the
a
main
theoretical meat.
course,
It's not
yes.
real meat. Main course.
theoretical meat.
This is no aperitif.
No, it's a meal. I guess we could call it the meal.
The meal.
But I think the meat is funnier.
the meal.
It is the meal. I kind of
don't
like
know.
that. It's stupid. Well, let's noodle on it.
Yeah.
Maybe not in this moment.
We'll noodle on it.
We'll think about
Let's
it.
get back to it.
Yeah,
But for now, it's going to be meat.
it is the meat.
It is meat.
And what is our meat? It's
Yeah. What is this?
just Gestalt. I don't know how to. Do you say
Gestalt.
Gestalt?
Mm-hmm. Like
Gestalt?
Gaston.
Oh, Gestalt. All right.
That's how I think of
That's
it.
a good way to remember.
Because there's like a medical, like Gestalt as well,
Mm.
which is where you just have experience and you just know things.
So you have like the main knowledge without breaking it down into smaller parts.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about Gestalt language processing.
Ooh.
So get ready to hear about it. And yeah, this term Gestalt has a few different meanings, but we're talking about it specifically in the context of language processing.
Okay.
So for this meet, I have an article titled Gestalt Language Processing, Its Role in Communication and Development by the Neuro Launch editorial team. And I got some information from this woman's TikTok account. It's called @SupportTheSpectrum.
Oh,
This woman is a clinical speech-language pathologist
I love it.
who specializes in neurodiversity support.
Nice.
So she had a lot of really good information on her TikTok about this, as well as other areas of autism. So go check her out because she's got a lot of good info on her page. So Gestalt language processing refers to a cognitive approach where individuals perceive and process language as whole units or patterns rather than breaking them down into individual components. So to put this another way, a Gestalt phrase is a melodic, intonation-rich, short or long phrase that the Gestalt language processor uses to convey a very specific meaning. So
I'm still confused.
I know.
Okay.
That's why I'm going to get into
Put
it.
it in another way. I'm still just as confused.
I know. And I've been like talking with a lot of people about this concept specifically because it is kind of tricky to explain. I hope I'm going to be able to do it, but it's not something that you can just say the definition. And it's like, oh yeah, I got it, you know?
Got it. Nailed it.
Yeah. So I'm going to give some examples to help you kind of understand what it is.
Okay. Thanks.
So to start with a little background, the term Gestalt comes from the German word meaning shape or form, and it encapsulates the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So you might understand that in terms of like other forms of Gestalt, where everything together, the whole idea is like very important compared to like breaking it down into individual components. I don't think that helped at all, so I'm going to keep talking.
Yeah.
Once again, this is very difficult to explain.
Super confused already.
So
keep going.
All right. In the context of language, this means that Gestalt processors tend to grasp the overall meaning or intent of a communication before analyzing its individual elements. So you may, like a child, especially developing language, may understand an entire phrase. And same with like learning a language yourself as an adult is actually a really good way to think about it. Like in Spanish class, you might learn this whole phrase and you understand the whole meaning and you know how to use
Como
that.
te llama?
Yeah. But if someone asked you, tell me what como means, tell me what tell me what llama means, like that one's an
I
easier
didn't
one.
get that far in Duolingo.
Yeah, so exactly. You understand what the whole phrase means together, but you don't really have a full understanding of each individual component of each individual word, And so often when you're learning a new language as an adult, you might start off learning those phrases just to have some functional phrases. And then as the class goes on, you'll then learn individual meanings of words and you'll move beyond that Gestalt language processing where yes, you're using these sentences and they convey meaning, but you can still break it down into individual words and you understand every part of the sentence. Whereas when you're first learning the language, you might just learn just that phrase without really being able to break it down into all those parts.
I see.
So it's actually a very common way for all children to learn language is with this Gestalt processing, where they're understanding, because they probably hear their parents repeat this phrase to them over and over and over. So they understand the meaning of that phrase. But if you ask a 4-year-old, break down every single word in that phrase and tell me the meaning, they won't be able to do that.
Yeah.
But they understand the unit of communication. But many non-autistic children develop beyond that, where as they grow up, they can learn those individual meanings of each individual word. Whereas autistic people, not all of them, but many autistic children and adults continue to use that Gestalt language processing into adulthood, where they continue to communicate with this one phrase has one meaning, and they struggle to kind of break it down into individual words. Historically, the concept of Gestalt psychology emerged in the early 20th century, primarily through the work of German psychologist Max Wertheimer, Kurt Kafka, and Wolfgang Kohlherr.
Those are great names.
Right? Kurt Kafka is a fun one.
Isn't that a writer?
Yeah, Kafka.
Yeah. Didn't he write about the cockroach?
La Cucaracha? I don't know.
Isn't that him?
You're asking the wrong person.
Metamorphosis? About a guy who turned into a cockroach?
Oh, I don't know. What is this?
Kafka?
I don't know. Are you just hearing the word Kafka and thinking cockroach?
No.
Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
Cue the music.
Yes. Kafka. Yeah. It's about a guy who turns into a giant cockroach.
Oh.
In Franz Kafka in 1912.
I didn't know that.
Oh, it was an interesting book.
Have you read
a little
it?
bit depressing. But I did read it. I read it in high school.
Look at you.
Yeah.
What was I doing? Not reading books.
I took a creative writing class in high school.
I did too.
With
Miss Welsh?
No, with Mrs. McCormick. Yeah, because one of my English teachers said I was bad at English. So my mom's like, all right, you're going to do more English classes. And I was like, God damn it. Just put me in chemistry.
Or just like test you for dyslexia.
Or, yeah.
Oh, I wonder why. More English.
Yeah, I know. They're like...
More of what she's bad at.
There's no... my mom did her best, but there was no, follow through of, she's just not doing well.
Yeah.
She's a slow reader.
Yeah.
So my mom's like, well, we'll just make her do more.
Yeah.
And
more reading.
I mean, she didn't know. She was expecting, maybe if the teachers were like, she's not doing well in these classes, but she's doing well in all of her other classes. So maybe, they just didn't give her any, guidance on how to, approach the situation,
Yeah.
So.
I know. And teachers and, specialists especially should be looking at those discrepancies in terms of, I'm sure you were doing super well in all your science classes, and you're obviously an incredibly hard worker. It's not like you were a lazy kid. You're the hardest worker ever. So if you're working so hard, doing well in science classes, and then not doing as well in English, yeah, you would think that someone would step in and be like, hey.
No, they were just like, she's not doing great. She's not doing it wasn't even, she wasn't doing great. She wasn't doing as well. Me.
Yeah.
It was me.
It's me.
It's me.
Jessica.
She wasn't doing as well in English as she was in the rest of her classes, is what the critique was. And so my mom's like, great, I don't know what to do with that. I'll just put her in more English classes and hopefully she'll get better.
Yeah.
Which is fair. I thought it was a good way. Yeah. So that's And then we ended up reading this weird book, and I liked it.
All right. Look at you.
You know what else I really liked?
What?
The Scarlet Letter.
Yeah?
It was so dramatic. It was like a telenovela.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
There's like so much drama behind it.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
It was fun. It was like over the top drama.
I was so over reading for English classes by the time we hit high school, especially after being in fucking literature and just having my joy for reading sucked out of my soul.
Well, you were in literature. Yeah, I was reading.
I was so bad about reading by the time I got to high school.
Can we read one happy book? All these books are so depressing. Can we read one that has like a good ending?
That would be nice.
You know, The Great Gatsby, Scarlet Letter, The Grapes of fucking Wrath. Oh my God.
Talk about
so
depressing.
Like, I get it. It's sad, but like,
people die.
I'm in high school and you're sapping my joy for. I need one happy ending. I think once a year they should do one book with one happy ending, even if it's like Goodnight Moon for high school level, you know?
How about one book that isn't written by an old white man? Wouldn't that be nice as well?
That would be nice too.
Yeah, I'd enjoy that.
I want one happy ending.
Yep.
I want one non-racist white man author.
Yeah. Not that much to ask for.
Yeah. I feel like that's fair.
Yeah.
High school teachers, get it together.
Yeah, listen up.
I've got requests.
Yep. All right.
Anyway.
All right. So I'm going to give you some examples of Gestalt language processing to help you kind of understand what I'm talking about. But first, I want to talk about the alternative to Gestalt language processing. So I feel like knowing what is the standard will maybe also make this a little clearer.
Okay.
So the alternative to Gestalt language processing is analytical language processing. And this is kind of interesting because the majority of autistic people use Gestalt language processing. Non-autistic people, the majority of them, use analytical language processing. The analytical language processing, though, is bottom up, essentially. So it's interesting that that is more a neurotypical communication type when, as autistic people, we have that bottom up processing for other things, but with language, I guess, I'm trying to figure out why this is essentially. But so for analytical language processing, that involves breaking down language into its individual parts. So breaking it down into its phonemes, which is like speech sounds, or morphemes, or words, or grammatical structures. So analytical processors typically learn by mastering these individual components and then combining them to form meaningful utterances. So this is like a bottom-up approach to learning language, and this is often associated with the traditional language learning method and is the predominant style in many educational settings where you're learning those little words like the, to, and you're like learning how to break words down into those individual phonemes, those sounds. And then after you've mastered those, then you learn how to put words together into phrases. Then you learn how to put those phrases together into sentences. Then you learn how to put those sentences into paragraphs. And so you're kind of starting with those little parts of speech and building them up into language. So that is the traditional way that most people process language.
Okay.
So on the other hand, you have Gestalt language processing, which is a top-down approach. So Gestalt processors tend to absorb language in chunks or whole phrases, and they often memorize or repeat these units without necessarily understanding their individual components. So they may grasp the overall meaning or the emotional context of an utterance before fully comprehending its grammatical structure or its vocabulary. So you'll see this a lot with autistic kids who are very hyperverbal, and maybe they're 4 years old, but they're able to use these crazy sentences, and everyone's like, oh my God, his language is so advanced. And in some ways, it is advanced. But if this child is a Gestalt processor, yes, they are able to use these big, impressive sounding sentences, maybe, but they wouldn't be able to break those sentences down into their individual speech parts. So it's not like they fully have this detailed grasp of the language and they're able to put it together, to build on top of each other, to create these intricate sentences. They've heard that sentence somewhere else. They've been taught it, or they picked it up from TV or just hearing someone say it, and they have internalized that whole big sentence to have one meaning, as opposed to the analytical language processing, where it's more of a one-to-one ratio, where one word has one meaning. One word has one meaning. Gestalt, a whole sentence could have one meaning. So you might say a sentence that has 10 words in it just to communicate one thought or one part of speech, you know? Some examples of this might be a kid who says, to infinity and beyond, to mean that they're ready to go on a walk. So to the outsider, let's say a 2-year-old is saying to infinity and beyond, and that means they want to go on a walk.
Infinity is a big word.
Yeah, it might be, oh my God, their language is so advanced, but they couldn't tell you what that means. They couldn't tell you what infinity means. They couldn't tell you what beyond means, you know? They've memorized that whole phrase, and they are using that in place of, I'm ready to go. They will say to infinity and beyond. And to them,
I see.
They are communicating the meaning, I'm ready to go. But instead of having that language, I'm ready to go, they're always going to use that phrase to infinity and beyond. And if you're an outsider, you are like, oh, that's cute. He's imitating Buzz. But for a parent, they would know when he says that sentence, he's literally just communicating it's time to go. He's not even in his mind referencing Buzz. He's just using that as his form of language. Other examples might be like a kid wants Skittles and they say, taste the rainbow instead of I want Skittles. Another example from the comment section of that woman's TikTok, there were a lot of good examples in there. But let's say a speech therapist shows a child a toothbrush and asks what the item is. And the child says, brush your teeth, instead of saying toothbrush.
Oh.
So they understand the function of the toothbrush. They have this phrase that means toothbrush to them. When they say brush your teeth, that could mean brush your teeth. It could mean toothbrush. It could refer to toothpaste. Like there are a lot of meanings that they could be communicating with that. But it's not that 1-to-1 ratio, where if you asked an analytical language processor, what is this, and held up a toothbrush, they would say toothbrush. So for the Gestalt processor, they would have this phrase, brush your teeth. Even if they're not literally ready to brush their teeth, that's how they identify what a toothbrush is. That's like how their brain stores that knowledge.
Okay.
Is that making a little more sense?
That makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah. I appreciate the many examples.
You're welcome. And it's not just for you, it's for everyone, because I know that this topic is like hard to communicate. It's very meta, you know, it's like talking about talking.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of...
It is meta.
Yeah. And it's a pretty advanced aspect of speech-language pathology, you know, which I do have a master's degree in. So I'm trying to like break this down to a level that's like non-SLP people will understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
You just get so wrapped up in the language after doing it for so many years that you're like, oh yeah, everyone like, yeah, Gestalt. Like everyone knows that.
No.
Yeah, I've worked hard on trying to be able to explain this.
No, I appreciate it. Also, way to put that master's to use now.
Hell yeah. Look at me now. Not a waste, Mom. So not just any phrase is a Gestalt just because you say it is. It has to have a deeper meaning to the Gestalt language processor. And this is because Gestalt phrases are very emotion-based, and sometimes they do not seem to fit the situation at hand, but they do to that language user. Like another example, someone was saying their kid, when they want to say it's time to go home, they'll say to the elevator, even if they're in a building with no elevator. They're not literally saying it's time to go to the elevator and go home. They were in some context where they had to get on an elevator to go home. And for some reason, they internalized that phrase to the elevator to mean it's time to go home. And so they would say that, you know, let's say they're out with a babysitter. The babysitter doesn't know that's their communication.
Right.
They're ready to go home and they say to the elevator. They're like, what the fuck? There is no elevator. We're in the park.
Right.
So it would be really confusing for an outsider who doesn't understand this language because it's not a 1-to-1 translation. Gestalt phrases can look very similar to echolalia, and they often come about as the result of echolalia, but they're a little different. So I'm going to explain the differences. So immediate echolalia is the immediate repetition or echoing of words. I think I've talked about echolalia on here before.
Not formally, but yes.
Yeah. That's just very common with autistic people. And some in AuDHD.
Echolalia is the repeating of words.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very common with ADHD, but especially autism. So you have the immediate echolalia that's right after you've heard a phrase where you just repeat it back. That could be a word, a phrase, a sentence spoken by someone else is the key aspect of echolalia. You're hearing someone else say it, whether in person or on TV or on the radio or whatever, and then you're immediately parroting it back. And so for immediate echolalia, it may be a form of processing language, like how you do it sometimes, Kristen, where you'll repeat the end of someone's sentence as they're saying it, like right after. And I can tell it's your way of trying to process what's being said.
Yeah, just so I like understand it.
Yep. So that could be
as it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be a function of that immediate echolalia, trying to like process what you're hearing. It can also be a form of verbal stimming, like I like to do when I hear a phrase on TV. that I really liked the sound of how they said it. I'll just like repeat
You'll
it back.
love Cinemagic. You're
Damn it.
welcome.
Thanks a lot.
I almost called you the other night at like 9 p.m. because I had it stuck in my head. And I was
Thank
like,
you
I
for
want
not.
someone else to suffer.
I probably already had it stuck in my
Yeah.
head on my own. So don't worry about me. I'm suffering at all times. So yeah, it could be a verbal stim like that. It can also be an attempt at communication. Like I feel like this happens especially with humor, where kids or adults are trying to figure out how to be funny. And let's say you're watching a movie with a bunch of people and you hear a funny line on the TV, you might repeat it back as a stim, or you might repeat it back to try to kind of be funny too, as like, oh, that's a line I could say to be funny. I'm going to just repeat this. So then there's also delayed echolalia, which is like the Cinemagic song, where it's not like we just heard it, but we go around saying it a lot, and it's kind of a stim. So this can also be considered
Very much a stim.
Yes. It can also be considered scripting. It's the repetition or recitation? Reciting. Recitation?
Recitation.
I don't know. Of previously heard words, phrases, or entire chunks of speech after a significant delay. So unlike, obviously, the immediate echolalia, it's not immediately after. It has to have some kind of significant delay between when you've heard it and when you're repeating it. So this is often seen with lines from shows, movies, books, conversations. I think a lot of autistic kids learn how to socially communicate this way. Like I definitely did when I was in middle school and high school. I memorized a lot of lines from movies and shows, and that was a way to kind of be funny and communicate when you don't know how to kind of engage in those social interactions. A lot of autistic people memorize these lines,
right?
Essentially.
And also you were like hanging out with our friend group who's all like ADHD autistic, so we were all doing the same thing because we didn't know how to like be funny or do
so we're all just like
communicate
parroting
appropriately. So we're just like parroting movie lines or things and Homestar Runner and what? Oh my god!
Yep. And sometimes it would be, just us stimming where we're kind of bouncing off each other, where we're doing it for dopamine, or we're doing it because it's funny.
Bouncing off of each
literally,
other.
Yeah, bouncing, slamming into each other. So yeah, but it can also be a way to communicate a need or express emotion when other forms of communication are challenging. And it can also serve as a form of self-soothing or stimming, and it can provide comfort in overwhelming situations. So
sometimes when I'm sad, I'll cry. You love Cinemagic.
And it soothes you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, so that might look like, if someone does have like a comfort phrase that they'll repeat in times of distress, and that kind of recenters them and calms them down. Yeah, it can just be like dopamine seeking, where you're just kind of fucking around, repeating this line obnoxiously, and you like can't stop doing it. So those are both forms of echolalia, whereas Gestalt...
It's different.
Yeah. Gestalt phrase, it's slightly different. Gestalt phrases are like scripting or echolalia, but there are some important and distinct differences. And it's mainly that Gestalt phrases are only used to convey a very specific meaning.
I see.
So even with the delayed echolalia, like repeating the Cinemagic song, we're doing it to stim. We're not doing it to communicate a specific,
Other than this is in my head. This is what I'm thinking right now.
Even like scripted phrases that do have a bit of meaning aren't necessarily a Gestalt phrase. Like, for example, one of my examples of what I say whenever I get a Gatorade, I have to say, that's why they call it Gatorade. I'm not using that to communicate I want a Gatorade. Like, I wouldn't go up to Ian and be like, that's why they call it Gatorade. And then he would know, oh, Grace wants a Gatorade.
Grace wants a Gatorade.
That would be a Gestalt phrase if that's what I use in place of any language for I want a Gatorade. So I'm just saying that as a delayed echolalia. I hear the word Gatorade. It triggers this thought in my head. That's why they call it Gatorade. I like have this compulsion. I have to say it. But that's echolalia. I'm not using that phrase to communicate the meaning I want a Gatorade. I'm just saying it because I'm fucking
that's
annoying.
What you're thinking.
Yes. Whereas a child who was using Gestalt phrases would go up to their mom and say, that's why they call it Gatorade. And then she would know, oh, Timmy wants a Gatorade.
I see. I see.
So that's the difference between echolalia and Gestalt. The Gestalt has to have this very specific meaning.
I see.
Many autistic children and adults are Gestalt language processors. There are some estimates out there about percentages. Some say 50%, some say like 85% of autistic people are Gestalt processors. But it seems like a really difficult thing to calculate, and those numbers don't seem super verifiable, so I'm not really going to include them. Gestalt language processing also is not exclusive to autistic people, and not every autistic person uses Gestalt phrases, but it is significantly more common in autistic children than allistic children.
It must be like, yeah, what do you take a survey? It's like a very difficult concept to understand, and to like do a survey to like the public.
Yeah, because
it wouldn't be reliable because people don't know what it is.
Yeah, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, I don't know. No, I don't think
Gaston?
my kid does that. Yeah. Who? Yeah, you're right. It's like such a hard concept to even explain to people, and then to have them give valid reports back of like, oh, my child does that or doesn't. I feel like it would just be kind of speech pathologists saying, oh, my autistic students do that, but who's looking at the allistic kids, you know? Because a lot of individuals use both processing styles to some degree. It's just like autistic people are more likely to use that as their primary form of communication. Autistic kids especially are more likely to use that as their like main form of communication. It doesn't mean that if you use Gestalt processing, you can't understand the analytical processing. A lot of people do use a mix of both.
Okay.
Like I said, allistic children also use those Gestalt phrases, especially as they're developing language, just like learning French or whatever, where you're going to learn those phrases. And then as you develop language further, you're then going to learn how to break it down into those individual parts. And so a lot of kids start out using those phrases, and then they move beyond that level of communication. And it's not their primary form of communication. So they're not going to continue using that phrase, you know, into 6, 7, 8 years old. They might use it at 4 years old. And then as they develop more complex analytical language, then they're able to form their own sentences with their own meaning. Whereas autistic kids are more likely to use that Gestalt processing as their primary way to communicate. And they're going to continue using that phrase maybe into adulthood, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah. Like an example of this that a lot of people do, whether autistic or allistic, is using like idioms and stuff like that. You know, like it's raining cats and dogs.
I use a lot of idioms.
Yeah, I do too. And that is kind of like a form of Gestalt, but it's not like you don't have the language to say it's raining outside. You're just using it as like, oh, it's raining cats and dogs to convey it's raining especially hard. Whereas a communicator who primarily uses Gestalt processing for their language would go to the window and say it's raining cats and dogs to indicate it is raining. Whether it's raining hard or not, that just might be their phrase to mean it is raining.
Okay.
So we use the idioms to kind of exaggerate things. It's like hyperbolic. It's a way to kind of emphasize what you're saying, but we're not using that in place of the language, it is raining. We're just using it as a figure of speech.
In addition to.
Yes. Yeah. A way to like emphasize it's raining especially hard. So because most people use a combination of both, well, regardless of, like, even if it was just autistic people using this, it would still be valid to, like, look into this and consider it a valid communication style. But especially because everyone kind of uses this more holistic approach to language processing to some degree, it really underscores the importance of recognizing it as a valid and valuable cognitive style rather than a deficit or a disorder. Like, the way it becomes a deficit or it becomes disabling is if a child is trying to use this phrase and other people don't understand what the meaning is and they're getting in trouble for it, or people don't understand it because it doesn't have that one-to-one translation of this means this. So it can lead to either, I feel like, underestimating how much a child knows or overestimating how much a child knows. Like I talked about, where you might have these hyperverbal kids who have these crazy sentences that they're saying, but they couldn't actually tell you the meaning of it. But people assume they do. Oh, they put the sentence together. They must understand it, not knowing he picked that up from Bluey. And that's why they say that, And so
the rest of his language is like see spot run or something.
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. Yeah. Like when you look further, you might see, like all of his phrases are Gestalt phrases. It's not like he's just using this as, like a cute little trait that he likes to repeat this phrase. No, he's using all of these different phrases he's kind of collected around him to form his internal dictionary.
This reminds me of, have you watched Star Trek?
Mm-mm.
Star Trek, the one with Picard. I forget what the Last Voyager, whatever. There's one episode I was so confused watching, and it basically, they go to this alien planet. They always go to an alien planet. They only speak in metaphors, and no one's been able to communicate with them.
Oh.
They're like, well, they speak English, but we can't communicate with them. And they're like literally only speaking. I have to find this episode.
That's what this is.
It's literally what it is. That's what it's reminding me of. It's like they literally only speak in metaphors. And obviously Picard saves the day because he figures it out. He's like, oh, it's metaphors.
Oh my God.
And then like by the end, you're supposed to like understand what they're saying. I still didn't know what they were saying. And he's like, I figured it out. It's a metaphor. They all speak in metaphors. But maybe they're just all Gestalt processors.
Yeah, they could be.
I'm going to have to rewatch that.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, send it to me if you figure out what that is.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
If you know what episode I'm talking about.
Billy probably knows.
I don't know
Billy
what
probably
episode.
knows.
Billy knows?
Probably.
She's a big Star Trek?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything nerdy Billy knows about. I'm going to have Billy.
I like Star Trek. I thought it was a great show. They talked about like heavy topics.
Is it?
And they weren't they the first interracial kiss on television? I think so.
I don't know like anything about Star Trek.
Anyway, yes. If you know what episode I'm talking about, send me an email, DM me, whatever you need to do, because it's bothering me now that I'm like 90% sure it's Star Trek.
Yeah, please let us know.
Yeah.
Because I want to know. Yeah, and if you think about it, let's say aliens came here and we were trying to communicate with them, but instead of like holding up a shoe and we just say shoe and we're trying to teach them, this is a shoe. We held up the shoe and we said some phrase like, it's time to go outside. That would be very confusing,
right,
because they wouldn't understand.
That would be their phrase for shoe.
Yes. And then they would become Gestalt language processors because they would look at a shoe and say, it's time to go outside.
If you hold up a shoe and go, you need to tie your shoes. Every time they look at a shoe, they're going to be saying, you need to tie your shoes.
Yes, exactly. And they're not necessarily communicating, you need to tie your shoes. They might just be saying, this is my word for shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like aliens is a good way to contextualize that. All right.
I see.
Yeah. So ADHDers may also exhibit Gestalt-like processing in certain cognitive tasks, including language. And similarly, some people with dyslexia might rely on Gestalt strategies to compensate for difficulties in phonological processing. So just like we're talking about using phrases instead of single words, this can also be at the other level where you can understand the meaning of words, but you have difficulty breaking it down into its individual speech parts. So breaking, and that's why dyslexic people have trouble pronouncing words they've never heard spoken before, because you have trouble understanding the phonological meaning of each individual letter and bringing it together to have this one meaning.
Sometimes when I'm either reading or I'm speaking and I know the word in my head, but I don't know it out loud, I try to say it like kind of mumbled, but as fast as I can.
Smart. And
it doesn't really work out for me, but that's my process. Is that what you're talking about? No.
Kind of. It's like
no. Like I think in our dyslexia episode, I was talking about an endarterectomy, which now I can say because I've written it. I do those procedures. I know that procedure. I've seen it written. I've heard the word. I know it. I know it now. It's up in my noodle. It's not going away.
Yeah.
But when I first learned the word, I saw it on paper first.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, fuck.
And you had like no idea how to pronounce it?
I added too many syllables.
Of course you did.
And I was presenting on the patient. I was presenting in front of a group of people, and I tried to say it kind of mumbly, and the attending, who was was like, what was that? And I was like, I was like, an endarterectomy is what I think I said, something like that. I added like too many ters.
Just throw them in there. You never know.
I figured it. Why not more?
Yeah, why not more? Take some extras. Yeah, so that's a good example of not really your brain having trouble understanding those individual phonological markers.
Okay.
So being able to look at each syllable of the word, figure out how each how each syllable should be pronounced and then blending that together into pronouncing this new word you've never heard spoken out loud before. That's really difficult for you.
Yes.
Because you have trouble, because you're dyslexic, you have trouble with that phonological processing, breaking a word down into its little speech parts.
Speech parts.
Yeah. So that is a similar concept to Gestalt, where let's say you've heard a word pronounced, you can understand the meaning of it, but then if I asked you, like, break it down into all its individual speech
or
sounds.
Or write it out based on speech sounds.
Yeah. You would probably have a really hard time. So even if you know the meaning of the word, you wouldn't be able to, like, spell it or break it down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's kind of a similar concept as Gestalt language processing. And so it makes sense that dyslexic people would also be Gestalt processors, where you're better at understanding things within a context than on its own in like these individual parts separated from each other. It's like how you can know something in a context, but then if someone asks you to explain it like just as a dictionary definition, like I can use a word in a sentence, but if someone says, what's the dictionary definition of that word? I'm like, I don't fucking know. I just know how it's used and how it's supposed to be used. Right. And so I can like get by on it, but I couldn't actually tell you the meaning of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's another example of kind of what Gestalt processing is. Each of the processing styles, whether it's the analytical processors or Gestalt, they each, like all things, have their own strengths and challenges. So analytical processors, and those are the people that are very good at breaking sentences, words, phrases down into their individual parts and understanding them at those like very basic levels. They often excel in tasks that require detailed analysis, such as grammar exercises or phonetic decoding. I think I'm actually pretty good at that. Like I was talking about in speech class one time, my friend Katie was very impressed with my ability to clap out syllables of words. And I was like, it just feels like a very, very common, basic aspect of language and being a grown-up. But I didn't realize that other people struggled with that. So to me, it seemed like, yeah, of course I can clap out syllables. I'm hearing them and I can...
wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah. I just didn't realize my
privilege. Grace
I know.
Can clap out syllables.
Brag, brag, brag. Not to make you feel bad, but I can clap out syllables.
Yeah, you should put that on your resume.
I might. I just might. So,
Excel's profession in clapping out syllables.
The longer, the better. She can clap out any length of syllable. So analytical processors might find it easier to learn new vocabulary in isolation and then apply grammatical rules consistently. But on the flip side, they might struggle with understanding context-dependent meanings or grasp the overall intent of a complex communication. So maybe they understand all the words that are being spoken in a sentence, but they have a harder time bringing it all together and seeing the big picture of the full meaning of this phrase. Whereas Gestalt is the opposite, where they might understand the full phrase, but they have trouble breaking it down into its parts. So they demonstrate strengths in understanding context, tone, and the broader implications of language. They may excel in tasks that require that holistic comprehension, like understanding metaphors or interpreting social cues in communication. But then they might face challenges when they're required to break down language into its component parts or when learning new vocabulary out of context. So if you're only able to learn language within a context, you're obviously going to struggle once that context is removed. And conversely, maybe you understand all the individual parts of speech, but then in the broader context, when all those parts are being brought together and now you have to understand this full paragraph or whatever, you might have a hard time building up all those little parts and putting them together and understanding the full meaning.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I hope I haven't gone back on the flip side of confusing you again.
It's a lot to process.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to Gestalt
process. Thank you for saying that. Well, we're almost done. Don't worry.
No. It's very interesting. It's like when you realize how much you don't know about a thing. This is something I've never fucking heard of, and I'm just not. It's like a whole new thing,
right?
It's like a whole new thing.
Yeah. I guess
it's like finding out a new species of bird exists.
Whoa. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad I could introduce you to this concept. Yeah. I guess if you're not a speech language pathologist, why would you be thinking about this? Or a teacher, I guess.
Right. And it's like thinking. It's meta. So it's like thinking about thinking and thinking about talking.
Yeah.
as you're talking.
Yeah, we're talking about talking.
Talking about talking and thinking about thinking. It's a lot. My brain is on full speed right now.
Good.
Thinking and talking about thinking and talking.
Yep, full speed ahead.
Mm.
I know it's also hard when you don't work with children because you see this a lot with little kids. And so I've obviously been exposed to a lot of kids who talk this way. And if you haven't been around those kids, yeah, it might be harder to like fully grasp what this means.
Right.
I feel like you're doing a good job. You're giving good examples.
Thank you.
It seems like you're getting it.
I'm following along.
All right.
Clunkily,
Clunkily, but you're there.
I'm there.
You know?
It's not graceful. I'm getting there.
It's never going to be. And that's just us, you know? That's just us. So one last part before I get to some signs that may indicate a preference for Gestalt processing and some strategies for like how to communicate with those processors. My last note is just that some autistic kids who are Gestalt processors may experience delays in expressive language as they work to break down and understand those components of language, of the language chunks that they've absorbed. So this can come a bit later into those elementary school years and this can be a big problem for kids in the gifted and talented programs, for example, where
we got to do an episode on gifted and talented.
We really do.
We need to.
Yes, I think that would, let's put it on the list because I think that would be a really good one. I really want to like look into them. I saw a good TikTok that was saying,
do they still have them? Gifted and talented
I think so.
Program?
Yeah, they had them when I was in the elementary schools back in 2017.
Oh, I was going to say, well, yeah, you were in one, of course. Yeah.
No, when I worked
and I was in
elementary.
the dummy kids.
Well, I saw a TikTok saying that essentially both were kind of like special education, where you're pulling kids out of the gen ed classroom, and whether you're putting them in this higher level or this lower level, you're still pulling almost exclusively neurodivergent kids out of the mainstream classroom and giving them some kind of alternative education.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the implications for that? You know, they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. I think they both do some good and some harm, just in different ways. And similarly to that, and I know it sounds like, oh, poor me, I was put in this, I'm such an advanced reader that I was chosen to be in this class, poor me. But really, this is a good example of how those things can be harmful, where you look at a kid and you're like, wow, their language is so advanced. They're using these crazy words and big sentences. And you're like, move them ahead a grade and give them all these advanced books and blah, blah, blah. Then they hit third grade and you realize, oh, they can't break a sentence down into speech parts. Like
Now they go back to the special class.
Yeah.
Welcome, motherfucker.
Yeah. Or they don't go back to that class and then they just feel really shitty about themselves and they struggle with English and language comprehension the rest of their lives, So it can be harmful to label a kid as like super advanced with their language if it's really just Gestalt processing and they're not understanding it to the level that adults think they do.
I see.
And on the flip side, it can also be harmful to look at a kid using a Gestalt phrase and assume that they don't understand the meaning of that. Like it can go both ways, where sometimes people will look at a Gestalt phrase and be like, oh, they're just repeating a phrase that they've heard. And they're not really understanding, like, no, that phrase does have meaning to them. They're not just saying to infinity and beyond. They're saying it's time to go.
Right.
And so so on the flip side, some kids may actually have more understanding of language than the adults realize because they just see it as echolalia. They're repeating phrases, but to the kid, they do have this deeper meaning of these phrases, but it's not being recognized as that. So that can also be harmful to the kid. They're trying to use their language in the way they know how.
In schools, speech pathologists, will they like pick up on this at all, or?
Hopefully, yes. I feel like we talked about it more at the preschool level because you see it a lot more frequently. I feel like by the time they hit elementary, a lot of kids have unfortunately like had it shamed out of them, or it's been just like interpreted by teachers or specialists as like meaning something specific, whether it's they have really advanced language or they have really delayed language. But yeah, I feel like it was talked about a lot more at that preschool level where you see it a lot more frequently. And hopefully speech pathologists are looking out for this in whatever context they're in.
Right.
Because I do think it is so important because, you could have a kid that actually has a lot of meaning to their sentences, but no one's picking up on it. So here are some signs that may indicate a preference for Gestalt processing. Like I talked about, people who use those scripted or memorized phrases. I know I said this already, but I just want to emphasize that Gestalt phrases are not ones that the kid has come up with themselves. They are always that scripted or memorized phrase where they are using the sentence that they heard somewhere and now they're using it to convey a certain meaning.
See. Okay.
They're not like coming up with it themselves and then now that sentence is what they use. They've heard it somewhere else, whether it's the same context or they've removed it from its context. They heard it somewhere originally and now they're using it to convey a certain meaning. Another sign that someone is a Gestalt processor is they have difficulty breaking down words into individual sounds. And like we talked about, that can also be a sign of dyslexia. So it's important to distinguish, is it dyslexia, is it Gestalt processing, or is it both?
Is it both?
And it is a strategy for dyslexic people. So it could just be a trait of a dyslexic person, a way that they learned how to communicate. A strong preference for learning language through context in real life situations as opposed to learning it in a classroom where you're learning dictionary definitions, essentially.
Right.
So I feel like, don't know, people benefit from learning language in context in real life situations, but I guess not. I guess there are lots of people who would prefer to like memorize a list of words and their meanings.
I mean, I guess if you're trying to learn another language, the best way to learn it is to be like immersed in the language.
Yeah, but I have a really hard time with that. And so I feel like I would prefer to learn some key
I want to learn
parts of speech
as much
first.
as I can to like get by because I'm also like a delayed processor too. So that was the hard time in Spain. Everybody speaks super fast.
Yeah. Same in Costa Rica. And they've got like the accent. Yeah, they're so fast.
Spanish is just a fast language. I can't hear that fast.
It's so fast. My brain can't process it.
I can't hear that fast.
Yep.
I need you to speak slower.
I know.
You know, when they're like, when you're when you're trying to communicate to a person who, at least in medicine, there's always like the e-learns that you have to do. And there's always one on like cultural sensitivity. And they're like, if you're speaking with someone who's a non-native English speaker, you don't want to just speak loudly and slowly at them because that can be insulting. For me, false news.
Yeah, please.
Please speak more loud.
And more slowly.
And more slow.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what I prefer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Yes, I agree. And like listening to someone speak Spanish, because I took Spanish for like 12 years, but I'm not good at it anymore.
Yeah.
I would recognize.
I was never good at it to begin with.
I was pretty decent at it.
Pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, you are dyslexic. So of course, learning a second language is going to be fucking hard. Like, it's impressive that you even took as many language classes as you did.
Yeah, because I went pretty far, at least in high school.
Yeah, you did.
I did, all the way to the top. I remember I sat next to Jose, who was really good at hearing and speaking, but really bad at writing. Because, his family was Spanish, so they all spoke Spanish.
Seems like cheating.
He was really bad at reading. Because I was like, he
Spanish
shouldn't be in this class. And then I saw his, had test answers. So we were like the opposite because I could read and write Spanish really well, but I couldn't hear or speak it. And he could hear and speak. And then when he was like writing down answers, I was like, oh, he doesn't know how to write or read Spanish.
Yeah, he just like learned it
in the context. He learned it in the context,
yeah.
So
you exist in the context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am much more like you where I do a lot better when I have it written down and I can see it. I think my brain just remembers it better and I understand it better. Yeah, just hearing someone speak it, I feel like I have no context for what's being said. Yeah. And I'm just like, whoa, I just get so frazzled and overwhelmed. Other signs that someone is a Gestalt processor, if they have challenges with traditional phonics-based reading instructions, so again, breaking.
If they're not hooked on phonics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, they're not hooked on phonics, but they maybe need to. They need to be. Yeah,
such a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll forgive it. And then a tendency to understand and use metaphors or idiomatic expressions early in language development, which is interesting because I do feel like a lot of autistic people speak in idioms.
Yes.
We make a lot of metaphors.
Yes.
Like I make metaphors. I feel like all my speech is metaphors.
Yes. I completely agree.
Yeah.
That's the only way I speak to my patients. I'm like that show from Star Trek.
Yeah.
I am the one who speaks only in metaphors.
Yeah. That totally makes sense when you think about it like that this is a sign that someone is a Gestalt processor is that they speak in these idiomatic expressions.
I have all these like metaphors and analogies, thank you, on how to talk to patients about, because I think vascular surgery is kind of difficult to understand. It's very technical. It's not like I'm going to have some general surgeon in my comments, but it's not like general surgery where you're just basically removing things. You get a tumor, remove it. Appendicitis, remove it.
Ooh, get ready for the emails.
remove it. Vascular is very technical. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a lot of plumbing. And that's hard to explain to people who don't have any medical background. It's hard to explain to people with medical backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of analogies. And I think that's like the best way and metaphors and things.
Yep.
And sometimes I can tell if it clicks with someone, they're like, got it, nailed it. And other times I miss the mark and they're like, please explain in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to explain complicated, as you're seeing in this episode.
Yes.
It's hard to explain these really complicated things at a level that people outside of the profession can like fully grasp.
Yes.
Because you forget like that not everyone knows these words or not
Right.
everyone, like there's so much context to provide in order to like even understand this.
When you're in your own little bubble of whether it's speech pathology or medicine or biochemistry or whatever, you forget that the public, the Commonwealth
Yes.
doesn't
Oh,
know. Yes. I think I've already told this story, but one of the best assignments I had was when I was doing my biochemistry major. I was in like one of my very advanced level classes, and I was also doing, everybody in a biochemistry major had to do some sort of research. So I was doing research with the chemistry people and using, basically we were shining light onto estrogen molecules and trying to make like a standard curve so we could detect it in water.
Totally.
Easy peasy, except it wasn't because our equipment broke down. But one of our professors was like, your assignment is to make one slideshow slide of your research and explain it so like the Commonwealth knows. I know that's not the right.
It's not.
She's like, if you're talking about DNA, you need to explain DNA. If you're talking, and I'm like,
that's so
and
hard.
everybody was like, fuck.
Yeah.
It was so hard, but it was such a good project because we all struggled with it. But it was so hard for people. You know, you're doing this very advanced research and now you have to explain it so people can understand it. I think that's a huge skill to have.
Yes.
Because if you can have all this knowledge, but if you can't communicate it, it's not worth anything, really.
Yep. Yeah. That is a really good assignment that I would have
It was so
failed.
hard. Yeah.
I would have done such
I think
a bad
a couple
job.
people did fail.
I cannot summarize to save my life.
It was a summary. Yeah, it was like one slide and you're like, it was so difficult. I struggled. We all struggled. It was.
Yeah, I bet. That's really hard.
Mhm.
But that's a good idea.
Mhm.
So some strategies for effective communication with Gestalt processors. These can be used in the classroom. These can be used just in everyday life. But I feel like these can be used as a parent and you're working with your kids. Just understanding that someone is a Gestalt processor is, I feel like, life-changing.
Processors?
I don't know. I've been trying to think about it. I don't think I am, but I think I do sometimes. Like I said, most people use a combination of both, but it's like when you're a Gestalt processor, you mostly use that with some analytical language. I think I'm mostly analytical language processor with some Gestalt in there.
What am I?
I don't know. I think you're also, I mean, it's hard because you're dyslexic. So it's like you are a bit of I don't know.
I'm different.
You're an enigma. You are different. You're just a little different.
Occasional Gestalt.
Yeah.
Is what I think you are and maybe me.
Yes. Yeah. But I feel like for adults, it's a bit harder because the way we speak and communicate has been so influenced and molded by society and by school and by adults. And, you know, maybe you were a mostly Gestalt processor as a child.
We're sheeple.
Yeah. Then the school system forces you to like learn all the speech parts and then you kind of have to communicate in a different way. Whereas, you know, a 5-year-old who's never been to school before, if they are a Gestalt processor and the parents haven't like beaten it out of them and they've actually encouraged them to use this form of communication, which isn't wrong. It's just different. You know, the communication, not the beating. The beating is wrong.
The beating is wrong.
Yeah. Gestalt processing is not wrong. It's just a different way to communicate and process language. So it's not something to be punished and be forced into this other way. There are strategies for how to encourage that like ability to break down language as the kid gets older without like punishing them for it. Like continue to let them use these phrases and then help them build upon it or help them break those phrases down or help them come up with new phrases that will be more functional for the general public, for the Commonwealth, if you will. To infinity and beyond is a good way to communicate with your parents who know what you're saying. It's time to go. But as the kid gets older, you're going to want to give them some type of language that other people will also understand the meaning of. So I feel like acknowledging that a kid is a Gestalt processor, not punishing them for it and not trying to like remove that form of communication, but just trying to give them more functional phrases that will allow them to communicate with people outside of their circle is the best strategy. So providing context and using visual supports when you're teaching kids can be really helpful. You know, teaching these phrases within a context will then help them be able to understand it outside of that context. But I feel like first teaching them language within certain contexts can be helpful if they're this type of processor, using visual support. So they're really developing this like rich understanding of this meaning of this sentence or whatever. Utilizing whole language approaches in teaching. So not trying to just sit this kid down and teaching them, okay, like at means this and the means this, like teaching them that whole language approach. And then later down the line, you can break it down into those individual parts, but not trying to only start at the bottom or only going to focus on these little speech parts, build them up to make full sentences, like approaching language in that top-down way.
It's also more fun, you know?
Yeah, to learn the whole phrase.
Yeah, learn a little phrase, a little something.
I guess it's like music. When I take up a new instrument, I want to just jump into learning a song. I don't want to learn each individual note and like how to build those together.
Gestalt
yeah, I am. When it comes to music, I really am. I don't know if that's my ADHD or it's Gestalt or what, but I just want to get right to the songs and then I'll kind of have context to be able to break it down into its individual parts. Like when you explain to me what a C note is, I will have already learned the song and then I can be like, okay, this note, this part in the song, that's a C note and now I know C note. And maybe because I am in general a bottom-up processor, like we've talked about in the past with autism, where you have to learn all the details first and then build up that big picture and then you understand it. I feel like because that's how my brain works with other things, like with music, I just want to learn the whole song first and then I'll break it down into its individual parts. Because if I just started from the bottom and learned all the individual...
You'd never get there.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's so boring.
Yes, I'd spend forever learning every fucking note and then I'd get bored.
A,
yes.
G,
yes.
B. Those are notes.
Those are notes.
Yeah.
E sharp.
Oh.
And I do feel like...
D minor.
Yep, that's another one. I do feel like that bottom-up thinking can cause us to get in our own way where we are like so bored by learning all these little details that we just move on from a topic.
Yes.
So in order to avoid that, I just want to learn the song. I'll figure out the notes as I go because it can be so exhausting to be that bottom-up processor. I don't always want to have to learn every fucking detail in order to understand it.
No, I totally get it. Yes.
Right? And when I think about it in that context, because I said I've been trying to work out, like Gestalt is a top-down language process, but the autistic brain
is bottom
up. I think because we're bottom up.
Tops and bottoms were meant to be together.
Yeah, they belong together. But it would make sense, I guess, if you're a bottom up processor, just like with the music thing, where when you're a kid and you're learning language, I don't want to have to learn every fucking little tiny part of speech. I just want to have a sentence that means this thing and then I can convey my meaning.
Yes.
And I don't want to have to start at the very bottom. So I guess that makes sense. Why is there this mismatch of you're a
tops and bottoms?
Yeah. Yeah. So you can be both, you know, you can be a top and a bottom.
Yeah. Isn't that called a switch?
It up. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can be a switch hitter. So another strategy for Gestalt processors, encouraging the use of storytelling and narrative in communication. So using language in these more fun ways instead of trying to focus on all these individual parts. Encouraging the use of storytelling, and then you can learn a lot of meaning through storytelling. Being patient with echolalia and scripting and recognizing them as important steps in language development is another really big thing. And that was something that drove me crazy in the preschool, where one teacher, I'll bleep this out, but Tammy would always get so mad about kids using scripting phrases. But I was like, that's how they're communicating. They're using that phrase to communicate a certain thing.
What's she mad about?
Just because that's not how you should learn language, that type of shit, you know, where they need to like move beyond this phrase, which like, yeah, eventually in order to be able to communicate, they should move beyond that phrase. But yeah, for now, this is the form of communication they have. Let them use the fucking phrase. Who cares if they need to like...
These are preschoolers, right?
Yes, preschoolers. 3, 4, 5-year-olds.
They're good.
Autistic 3, 4, and 5-year-olds.
Also... You're not going to be able to get a 5-year-old to do shit.
No.
They're menaces. They won't do
tell
anything
me about it. Yep.
You tell them to.
Yep.
You know? That's like the whole spiel.
I know. So
they
like,
get to be 5
meet
and
them
cute,
where they're at.
And they're like the, you know, physical embodiment of the devil.
Yep. Yep, exactly.
They're going to do what they want to do.
Yes. And I may need to step out during puzzle time, but the rest of the time they can do whatever they want to do. Yeah. So, and like, a lot of kids in the preschool would have these scripts that they would want you to engage in where you have your parts, they have theirs. And it's, every single day they'll start the script. You repeat, you say your part, they say their part. And it's just a self-soothing thing. It might be a way to communicate. It might just be them. It's a way to engage.
Do you have an example?
It's a way to engage with someone. I'm trying to think. I had this one kid who would do it all the time. And this teacher hated it and didn't want us to engage in these scripts with this kid. I would do it anyways.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't
fuck them.
I had one kid who, whenever we would get ready to go outside for recess in the winter, we had a visual chart of what to put on first. First, you put on your snow pants, then you put on your boots, then you put on your mittens and blah, blah, blah. He would want to go through the exact same order every single time, step by step. He would say, what comes next? And I would say, let's look at the chart. Or I would say, it's time for a hat. And he liked doing that, where he would kind of take on this teacher role and he would say, what comes next? And
that's
then
adorable.
Yeah, it was really cute. And it helped him.
Yeah.
It told him the order. We would work on it together. He knew he was engaging with me. It was back and forth communication. Just because it's a script doesn't mean it's not back and forth communication. Right. It doesn't mean it's not valuable.
Scripts have their purposes.
Yes, absolutely.
We use script. Even neurotypicals have scripts.
Oh my God! Yeah. Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Good. How are you? That's a script.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. That's a Gestalt. That's a Gestalt phrase, really, that we're all using, because we're not actually asking how are you doing.
We're just saying,
you're using it to mean hi. Essentially.
I'm acknowledging your presence.
Yes.
And I'm trying to appear friendly.
Yes, exactly. So we use these phrases all the time. I really feel like the difference is this a socially accepted phrase that we now just think of as just a figure of speech or something we all say? Or if it's the out of context version, like to infinity and beyond, then it's oh, well, that's a Gestalt phrase because only they use that to have that meaning. So I feel like the more commonplace it is, the less it's seen as a Gestalt phrase and the more it's just seen as a figure of speech. But figures of speech are essentially a form of Gestalt processing. We just don't think of them like that. Because everyone knows the meaning. Everyone knows this means this. It's raining cats and dogs doesn't literally mean it's raining cats and dogs. We all have come together and agreed upon the meaning. This phrase means it's raining hard. So with Gestalt phrases, if everyone adopted to infinity and beyond means it's time to go, then that would just be a figure of speech where you would just say it and everyone knew the meaning. It's only when other people don't use that phrase to mean that thing that it kind of can become problematic because people don't understand. So yeah, being patient with the echolalia and the scripting. Don't try to get a kid to stop doing it. It's self-soothing. It's a way for them to communicate. Leave them alone. Let them communicate.
Alone.
Yeah, you can always
let them communicate how they want to communicate.
Yes,
especially
and then
if they're
build
preschool.
and then build on top of it.
The fact that they're communicating is a step. You know?
I know. I'm trying to think of. I had another kid who would always say, and he got this phrase because I guess a couple of old teachers used to do this whole thing with him, but he would say look, Grace, what's on the ceiling? And then you would look up and you would say, I don't see anything. And then you would look down and he'd be making this silly face. And then I would say something else. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was that where he would just want to go through this routine. He would always say, Grace, look, what is that? And then I would look at the ceiling and then I would say the thing back. And it was just a nice way to socially engage. Some kids don't know, especially autistic kids, don't know how to initiate play or communication with other people. And so they might use their scripts in order to communicate. And I think that's wonderful. And then also using natural conversational language rather than oversimplified or fragmented speech with Gestalt processors can be helpful. Parents who just talk to their kids like they're adults and they're not trying to be oh, what's this? Is this a ball? Can you say ball? They're kind of just always speaking of oh, we roll the ball back and forth.
Mom needs snack.
Yeah. Yeah, where you're not
just I'm eating this.
Yeah, you're not trying to focus on the tiny little parts of speech. I saw a good example from those TikToks of that woman talking about this, where someone was giving an example of a Gestalt phrase. Their kid will say, "Gotta catch 'em all," and that means they want to play ball because they're talking about a Pokeball.
That's really funny.
Yeah,
yeah.
So it's funny, what it's essentially a kid hears a certain phrase that somehow in their brain forms this direct translation of this phrase means this. And I think it's so delightful and funny when kids have these phrases to mean certain things.
Yeah.
Kylie's little brother, he's 5, I guess during gymnastics class. I guess this is more delayed echolalia, but they've been listening, he and his dad have been listening to the radio on the way over to gymnastics. They're all sitting in a circle, instruction. He looks over to his dad, who's like with all the parents, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, gotta love that chicken from Popeyes," which is from the Popeyes commercial. His dad's like, "Great, buddy. Pay attention, though." Yeah. But that kid is like super, super smart. I think he's like learning Russian or something.
Oh my
or
God.
Korean, yeah, because he's very intelligent. And then lastly, educational approaches for Gestalt learners should focus on that holistic, context-rich methods, which might include whole word reading strategies instead of the phonics-based approaches.
So like reading books instead of flashcards.
Yeah, that could be an
Yeah.
example. This is hard because I feel like sometimes teaching reading can just focus on like sight words. Like I think that's a problem now in schools where kids don't know how to read because they're just focusing on sight words where you look at a word and you say, that means this, but you're not able to break it down into those individual phonemes.
Right.
But
Some words are sight words though, right?
Yes.
Because they're spelled weird.
yes, where you just have to know that
The.
this means this. Yeah, although you could, if you had a good understanding of phonics, you could sound, like I could look at that word and sound out and be like, you know, like.
There's an E there. There's no way.
Yeah,
That is it should be the.
Yeah.
The would be the phonetic way, right? The, T-H-E.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Or the.
Well, the TH can either make a th sound or a th sound. Yeah. So it's called a voiced and voiceless sound. So there's like a voiced
The.
there's a voiced TH, which is th, and there's a voiceless TH, which is the th.
So it's either the or
The.
the. But not the.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, that's a good example.
Of is another one.
Yep.
That's dumb. That's a dumb
Yeah, you just have
way.
to know.
You just have to know that that's the way that is.
Yes.
Which is dumb.
Yeah. So Gestalt learners.
Spanish-speaking people don't have these issues, right? Everything's so phonetical and Espanol.
Yeah, I think it is pretty phonetical. Is that a
Maybe
word?
that's why they talk so fast, because it's so easy.
Maybe. I don't know. That doesn't sound right. Teaching grammar and vocabulary in context rather than isolation. So that would be like teaching a vocab word within a sentence or within a page of a book as opposed to just trying to teach.
Oh, Duolingo does that.
Yeah. So instead of trying to do a flashcard of memorize the meaning of this word, you're learning it within context.
I see.
Yeah. And then that kid could understand how to break the meaning down from that. But first, you want to start by teaching it in context instead of trying to force them to memorize this word and then figure out how to use it in a sentence. It's like, I'm not going to know how to do that. Teach me in the sentence, then I'll figure out the dictionary definition later. And using literature, storytelling, and real-life scenarios in language instruction so they have that context to understand. And then incorporating visual aids and multisensory learning experiences can be very beneficial.
Multisensory.
Yeah. So that could be like a tactile thing where they're, squishing a ball as you're teaching them the meaning of like squish or whatever.
I see.
So really not just being like, memorize this word. This, squishy means soft and you can squeeze it. Like you're giving them a ball and you're squeezing it as you're saying squishy means this. And you're teaching
that's
them.
what Anne Sullivan did with Helen Keller, right?
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah. Yeah. So just incorporating as many senses as you can is going to be the best way. I think for all kids, I feel like would benefit from learning that way. But especially Gestalt processors.
Better understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. Where you just like are understanding it through a variety of different sensory experiences, I guess. And then future research that is going on about this. One area of focus is the potential connection between Gestalt processing and the unique cognitive strengths often observed in individuals with autism. Researchers are investigating whether the tendency towards Gestalt processing might contribute to the exceptional pattern recognition abilities, visual spatial skills, and creative thinking often associated with autism. So I'm interested to hear what comes out of this because I'm the more you learn about this, the more it's, for me at least, I'm like, okay, like what are the implications of what's happening in the brain where these connections are being made, where things are being grouped this way? And I think it does relate to that pattern recognition. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Where with autism, there are a lot of things I've learned how to do because I've learned the pattern, but maybe I don't know all the individual skills. Like learning how to use a word without actually knowing the dictionary definition. I think I pick up a lot of information through watching and imitating, but then I couldn't actually tell you like what those skills are. I couldn't like break them down. And then last thing, emerging theory suggests that Gestalt language processing might be linked to differences in neural connectivity and information processing in the brain. And some researchers hypothesize that individuals who primarily use Gestalt language processing might have stronger connections between certain brain regions, allowing for more holistic processing of information.
Ooh.
And if you think about it, if everyone communicated this way, this would actually be the more efficient way to communicate, you know, where it's like,
I think the issue with communicating this way is that the meaning of these like phrases are different per person.
yes, but I'm saying if everyone used this and this was like a very standardized thing, if anything, I feel like this communication might be a little more efficient, but that would require everyone to learn the meaning of all these phrases.
Right.
So is that really efficient? Whereas if you break things down
Or if,
by
I
like
guess,
phonemes, everyone has the tools to then go forward and
Right.
understand meaning because you have the basic tools of language.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I get they both have their strengths and their weaknesses, you
Right.
know? Like if you have two kids who are twins or whatever, they're 4-year-old twins and they have Gestalt processing, they've probably developed their own kind of like twin speak almost.
Right.
Where they have their own language.
That's very common, right?
Yeah.
Twins having their own kind of language.
Yeah. Yeah, very common. And especially if you had two autistic Gestalt processors as
Oh,
twins,
yeah.
God, you
Forget
wouldn't know
it.
what the hell
Yeah.
they're saying. But they would be able to understand each other very, very
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
So, you know, if everyone could communicate that way, it would be efficient. But obviously, everyone can. So instead, why don't we just like accommodate everyone and
Yeah.
be open to
Well, that's what
everyone
language
learning?
is all about, right?
Yeah.
Is communication.
And that there's not like one specific way to do it,
right.
you know, is really the message I want to take from this. So yeah, that's it.
Well,
Just
shoot.
quick little bit.
Learn something new. This was a lot.
It was a lot.
This is a lot to think about.
Yeah.
I still don't know what I am.
Yeah. I don't know what you are either. I'll have to think about it.
I feel like I'm a mix of both.
Yeah, I think you are too. And I think most people are a mix of both.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you see that like primarily and maybe exclusively Gestalt processing is either in kids or maybe people who have higher support needs of autism and they don't have that analytical language, but they still do have language, and it's important to recognize that as a valid form of communication. But yeah, so I think most people probably use a combination of both, and you don't even really realize what phrases you use that are Gestalt phrases. So try to pay attention to them and see if you notice any in your day-to-day life where you're like, oh yeah, I guess I do use that phrase to have this meaning. Like I think
I'm gonna have to write these down.
Yeah.
Now, all my little idioms that I
Right?
use.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like I use a lot, but I honestly can't think of one right now. Not even one.
I know the Gatorade one was really the only one that
Gatorade.
came to mind for me. I'm like, should I just start using that to mean I want a Gatorade? If I just go up to Ian, I'm like, that's why they call
Well,
it
that's
Gatorade.
not an idiom. That would be your own Gestalt
Yes.
processing.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
All right. I'm catching on to the lingo.
Yeah.
I'm catching on.
Yeah, look at you. You are.
I do a lot of immediate echolalia.
Do. Yeah, I do too.
Do.
Yeah. And I do, especially God with accents. When people speak with an accent, I have to like stop myself from repeating what they just said. On
Yeah.
TV, I can go crazy because they're not around to hear it. But I
It's not
love
that
when
you're-
someone says a certain thing in a certain way, it just like tickles my brain. I'm
Right.
like, ooh, I gotta
Aluminium.
yes, I gotta repeat
every
that.
time. Every
Aluminium.
time. And you're not making fun of them. It's just you're
No.
processing it.
Yeah, it's echolalia. It's
Mhm.
just, I like the way that sounds.
I can see how some people would think
yes.
that you're making fun of them and being
Yes.
rude.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that.
I understand that. So we do it in private.
Yes, yes. All right.
Oh, shoot. All right. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Thanks for, it was like SLP 101 here.
I know. Look at me.
Look
yeah.
at you.
This was good practice for me to see if I can break down these concepts in
Yeah.
a way you can understand. So I hope you
Appreciate it.
learned.
Yeah, I learned.
If you out there are a Gestalt processor, or you have a kid who's a Gestalt processor, or you have like any funny phrases that you notice
Yeah.
they use or that you
What's
use.
an idiom that you use a lot?
Yeah. Or a Gestalt phrase that
A
you
Gestalt
use
phrase or
that
an
no one else
idiom?
would understand the meaning of.
Oh, yeah. Maybe
but-
I'll make it a poll cue. Like
Yeah.
a write-in one.
Yeah. Although, once again, they'd have to like fully understand what this means,
Yeah.
which can be difficult.
Maybe I'll just ask for idioms. I'll think of it.
Yeah.
I
all
got
right.
time.
Noodle on it. Yeah. You got time.
Yeah. Let me nudes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested to hear people's feedback. If you have any thoughts, if you realize you're this type of processor or you're like very much not, or you have encountered someone who is this way and you were kind of confused about what these phrases mean and then you figured it out. It's kind of like a puzzle, it's kind of fun. Like you're talking about in Star Trek where he like figured out what these phrases meant. It's kind of exciting when you figure out.
It's all metaphor.
Yeah. It's fun when you're like, oh, it's like decoding. You're like, oh, that's why he keeps saying that. That's what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun, Gotta love that chicken for Popeyes. If you have any thoughts or feedback or questions and you want to let us know, you can email us at weirdsofafeather@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram at weirdsofafeather. Kristen does polls every Monday night, posts the results on Wednesdays.
Yep.
Come check us out. You can join our Facebook group. You can visit our website at weirdsofafeather.com. You can buy us a coffee to keep this horse train running at ko-fi.com/weirdsofafeather.
And then on our website, we have merch you can buy. You can get a Nutsucker tote. You can get stickers, T-shirts. We're still working on more merch for you guys. So if you really want something specific, let us know.
Yeah. And we're working on
on a Patreon. Legit
we're
Patreon.
Doing it for
not
real,
just,
guys.
Not just regular
it.
Patreon where it's just there, but like legit stuff.
Like you'll get content.
Yes.
So we're working on that. It'll be soonish.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can donate money to us and you'll actually get something in return, which is what we would prefer and what you would prefer.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
we're someone reached out the other day. I might talk about her more about like possible live shows and stuff. She was very, very sweet. And I was like,
oh yeah, I saw that.
We are a 3-man crew of you, me, and Christopher doing most of the work here.
Yes.
So
it's very flattering though that she thought we were doing live shows,
she the sweetest person who's ever wrote in. No, that's not true. There's many nice people who write in, but yes, she was very flattering. I'll read the whole, maybe on a bagel bite, I'll read the whole thing.
Yeah, we'll do a bagel bite.
We're a small crew here, so any little bit helps. But, we understand times are tight. But what also helps is if you follow, subscribe, interact with our posts, give us a 5-star review, any of that, non-money stuff. Monetary stuff, thank you.
Yep.
Is also helpful and we appreciate it. And we just love to hear from you in general.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Even if you're just sending us a DM or an email or you're commenting or whatever.
Liking a post.
Yes.
That's great.
It's meaningful.
Yeah.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kristen.
Yours.
You have a bod for us today.
I got a bod.
Should we move into that bod?
I want your bod.
Nice bod.
This is another one where we probably definitely need to get a different song.
Is that a song? Are we calling that a song?
Jingle.
Even jingle feels like too generous. More like just a stupid thing we say. An echolalia phrase, if you will.
Very much
really.
true, yeah. But maybe we should think about getting like a legitimate jingle for the bod that explains that it's the bird of the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes in these meaty episodes, we like to have a little bit of fun at the end. So we do this bird of the day where we imitate bird calls on weird birds because, we talk a lot about birds here.
Yep. Weirdly enough, we're bird-themed.
We're bird-themed
because
it's like
ADHD
a flock.
Podcast.
Yeah.
You get it.
Got it. It's like a flock.
Yeah.
We're like we're together. Feather. It's in the name.
Yeah.
We're bird people
and
now.
birds are freaks also. Birds are so weird.
I have birds now. I have chickens.
That's right.
And I think by the time this airs, we'll already talk about chickens.
Yeah.
They are freaks and they are dumb.
Well,
they're dum-dums. Mine are, at least.
Chickens.
Maybe.
Some birds are very smart.
There's actually
some are very dumb.
smart birds. Not my birds.
Yep. All right. What's our bod?
We're bird-themed. We're talking about the gray go-away bird, or also known as...
Is that a scientific name?
No, it's not. Or the Grey Lourie, called the gray go-away bird. And believe it or not, it's a gray bird with a pink mouth. Or they called it the gape, which I believe is the inside of the mouth.
I don't like that.
Right? Isn't that most birds? I don't know enough about birds to know whether or not that's normal. But it's mostly gray.
Okay.
It's almost exclusively gray. And it lives in the Afrotropics, which is like mid-Africa down. And it has a distinct either like, quote, go away or a koe bird call.
So it's not, people didn't name it that because they're like, God, this bird won't fucking go away.
Yeah, no. I think it actually, so I read on one website, it said that the go away call is like specifically if there's like a predator or humans around or someone we should be like sus about, and it's really bad at flying, but it is very good at like scurrying across tree tops. And it likes to eat fruit like bananas.
Oh, well,
You ready?
Yep. Let's hear it.
The YouTube video is very windy, so it's something we're all going to have to deal with.
Okay. That was pretty good.
That was really good. Yeah.
I like that. I like that bird.
That's a good little bird call.
Yeah. I think we got it.
Yeah, I think we nailed it. I think this has been our best one yet.
Yeah, I think it's up there. We're probably way off. But
Yeah,
that's okay.
someone's ears are bleeding right
Yeah,
now.
someone's like, God, they're still. How are they still so bad at this?
All
How
these
have they
birds.
not improved?
All these birds.
For years they've been doing this.
Years.
They've not
Still
improved
not
one
better.
iota. And that's the way we like it,
Yeah.
you know? That's why
Yeah.
we prefer it. Okay, see ya.
Bye.